This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
You're listening to Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast with your hosts Ryan Milford and Sean Lavery.
Welcome back to the Bass Fishing for Noobs segment on the Paddle and Fin podcast. I'm your host, Sean Lavery, and with me as always, my co-host and pal, Ryan. What's up, buddy?
What's up?
Well, we'd like to welcome back all of our listeners to the show. Tonight we got another epic guest, Mr. Jedediah Plunkert. He's going to join us tonight. We're going to try and talk about some topwater stuff, but we'll start off by, I know Jedediah, I think you've been on the other shows once or twice before, but for our listeners, we'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself in case they don't know you, and tell us a little bit of how you got started in fishing, kayak fishing, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. So I originally grew up like in the Mid-Atlantic region. I started fishing at a young age. A lot of the tidal Potomac area early on, farm ponds, normal stuff that I could get to outside of like the Baltimore area. Would travel along like with a bicycle, bringing a rod or two across the handlebars, packing a backpack full of lures, auditioning all different types of things of maybe where I could catch fish, maybe it could be trout, a lot of bass, learn how to crappie fish. They have some reservoirs around that you could get into via questionable access at times, but I learned a lot through there. Learned how to fish some rivers at a pretty young age, I would say maybe 10 or 11. I got started on the Shenandoah River, like in Shenandoah, actually, Shenandoah County. So a friend of my father's introduced me to canoes and moving water and how to fish moving water. And from there, I just loved it. I would go down for a week and just stay. If I wasn't in the canoe, I'd be working the banks and waiting and learning more or less what not to do at that point. But had a good time with it. So years went by. I fished pretty much daily when I was a kid. Got into high school, moved around quite a bit, got into tattooing, and then, a few years into tattooing, I was probably in my early 20s. I got back into fishing, worked with one of the coworkers. I got into the kayak scene. That was early on, and I got my first boat, and then it was just like, it just lit a fire. I think that was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, maybe a little better even, but I got some pictures dating back from some of those times of, one of those early on, like Swifty 9.5-foot kayaks and very questionable rigging that I did, But,
it was all do-it-yourself back then, right?
It was, yeah. And I set sail, and I remember being at some of the, outdoor shows, and I think when I met Jeff Little, that was the big turning point, and I more or less stalked that guy. Like after meeting him, I learned what you could really do, like with with smallmouth and kayaks and these areas you should get access to. So I bought his book. I started talking to him a lot, and I think he had like a lure company at the time. So just pursued more and more information from that guy. Learning how to rig stuff. Became really good friends with him. He became one of my best friends, and then eventually like a manager to me with Wilderness Systems. That was probably 4 or 5 years back, but we did a lot together, so that's, like I said, that was kind of the fuel that set the fire into deep water, largemouth, and snakeheads. We commented a little bit about snakeheads in the past. We did catfish trips and saltwater trips, and, it was just kind of lights out at that point. So I pursued the tournament trail a couple years into, I guess, being more efficient, professional status, if you will, whatever you want to call it. And that was my platform. That's what I enjoy the most. I feel like, I passed on a lot of information. I started guiding around that same time. So I guess that's kind of a brief history. And through that, I pursued a handful of tournament trails, in the past. I still am involved in some of them now. I'm not sure where the future's going to take me. I'm not quite sure on that yet, but we'll find out.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, man. And definitely, I think, earned your chops. We've had Jeff on before, and he's definitely an awesome source of information, So I can see where, it'd be addicting just to follow that guy around. So, so would you say you prefer moving water or more flat water at this point?
At this point, and kind of, river I gotta fish, I suppose, but I do prefer moving water. Yeah, I still like the rivers. I enjoy reading the water, and I think I like rivers so much because they're ever evolving. They're changing all the time. You could fish the same river 100 times and never really fish it the same way. Essentially, it's always going to move things, any flood or drought or anything. Sometimes it's going to fill in soot in some of those corners that might hold depth in the past, and now it's filled in, or vice versa. So the structure is always changing and evolving, and I think fish do that with it. So being able to evolve and move around with that, that's a challenge. It's kind of fun. It's not just one deep hole or a ledge system in a lake, or maybe a deeper, slower part of the river that you can go and catch fish, which I do that too. But I like the things that's always evolving. When grass starts merging in early spring, knowing where to go to find that. And, this time of the year in the summertime, like trying to find oxygenated or fast moving water to where, a few months prior, you're focusing on only the eddies and only the slower moving stuff outside of, current breaks or whatnot.
Yeah, I've we were talking a little bit before we actually started recording, and rivers, I'm like falling in love with them. They're, well, Duck River anyways, that's where I've been going. But I thought I'd river fish before because go out Stones River here in Tennessee that runs into Percy Priest Lake, but it's like 20 feet deep in a lot of it, and there's not a whole lot of current. There's just a little bit that pulls along. There's no like riprap or nothing like that in the areas that I've been fishing. But got up there on Duck River, and it's like 10 feet is deep, and coming up on areas where like it's coming down so strong. Like I got to get out of the kayak and drag it upstream if I'm trying to go up river and float back. It's fun. And actually been getting on a few smallmouth out there. I can't remember if I talked about it last week, but I got a new PB last weekend.
Nice.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
It's nothing huge. It's like 17 3/4, but my previous PB was 17 1/4, and so got it about half an inch.
That's it. Did you get a bunch of pictures of it?
I actually didn't. I don't know what I was thinking. I took, we got the Paddle and Fin Noobs tournament here, for people that are, newer to tournaments and stuff, to kind of get a feel for it and everything, the whole kayak tournaments. And so, I'm in that, and, I got my picture for that, a picture of it on the board and everything, but like I didn't get no hero shots, like holding it up or nothing like that. I'm like, why didn't I do that? Which I think part of it was, I couldn't hardly get the hook out. I ended up having to cut the hook out. And so it was out of the water for a while. So I think a lot of it was like I was trying to get it back in the water quick so, it wouldn't die or whatever. And I guess I wasn't thinking about the picture at that point.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Well, you got one on the board, so you always said as a keepsake.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to get hit up, or like get a message from Josh Stewart saying, "Hey, let's go float the ducks. You can show me where those 20-inch smallmouth are out there."
Yeah, there you go.
So, Josh, if you're listening, hit me up.
Help the guy out. That's right.
So, all right. Well, let's get into Topwater a little bit. Would you say that's one of your go-tos, or is that more? It's I mean, it's obviously probably situational a little bit, but what do you think about when and where, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So it can be a go-to of mine. In the past, it was 100%. I would throw Topwater sometimes all day long. I look at it now as situational. Definitely prefer, like, if it's moving water or still water, those flat glass days that are, the water's just still and calm. Overcast is always good. The fish get moving around a lot. Even some rain sometimes isn't bad. I don't think it turns off the topwater bite too bad. So yeah, I will throw it. I don't think that it's my number one presentation that I would go to all the time. But, it's a guilty pleasure. I love it when you have something that's putting around on top water and then it's like an effing bomb goes off underneath of it. That's a pretty contagious feeling. That's awesome. So if they do that all day, yeah, I'll probably would throw it all day. Yeah.
That was one thing when you said about glass calm, and I've had mornings where I've been out like on the lake first thing in the morning and it is like glass, and I always think, I'm like, well, should I throw topwater? But then I'm looking around and I see nothing else across the surface of the water, so I'm like, why would it hit something that is not like anything else? So that's usually why I don't throw it, but it sounds like that's probably the best time to throw it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat when you get to see something that's, you might be throwing in 8 inches or 10 inches of water essentially, and you disrupt that water so much, and then you'll see, like, this boil or this bee just make a beeline straight to it and just, knock this out of it essentially. But that's pretty cool. So if you'll see that happen too, just with bait fish offside of like grass beds, or doesn't always have to be shallow water. They can come out of 20, 30 feet of water as well. Tennessee, from what I take it, they fish some pretty deep, clear water, like in the middle of the night, top water, and that's a go-to presentation like this time of the year. So I've done that as well. We have some reservoirs here that the nighttime thing, I would say that probably would be my number one presentation. I would throw top water a lot at nighttime, along with other things as well. But it gives the fish, I think, something to locate, so to speak. And it gives the angler, verification that you're in the water for one. Sometimes you're casting at a shoreline, and I've fished minutes at a time and probably been 16 feet in a tree off the water. Never really touched it.
I had that
practical realization to come to at times. But when you hear that, whatever it is, the Whopper, Plopper, Buzzbait, Popper, whatever it is that you're throwing top water, you get that verification. You're doing something right with the cadence of it or the speed of it. You get the audible. You get the sound of it as well. And you'll get some fish that miss it, as too. But you're in the right area essentially at that point because you're doing something right. You attracted the attention.
Okay.
Yeah, I had that happen not too long ago. I fished a night tournament. It was a jigs only tournament. It was from like 4 in the afternoon, 10 at night. And there in that last like 30 minutes, it was a 3-fish limit. I had 2 fish. I was trying to find that 3rd fish. And like there was this wood in the water. Part of it was sticking up, and I cast over by it. I had a swim jig on. I slow rolled it back to me. I cast back out there. It looked like it landed in the same spot. And I'm going, and all of a sudden I get snagged up. I'm like, what am I snagged on? I didn't snag there the last time. And come to find out, I was in a limb up above the part that was sticking out that I was casting at.
Yeah, they fight pretty good sometimes too. Yeah.
That's me. I have set the hook on so many logs, it's not even funny.
Yeah, it's like you give it a good like 10, 20 seconds worth of a fight, at least you're doing something there. But yeah.
Oh man, hey, I was so embarrassed here like a month ago. I was out on the river and I floated by these people, like there's like 4 or 5 people in kayaks, like a family. I don't think they were even fishing. I think they were just in kayaks. Man, I floated past them. They're all like looking at me and said, like complimented my kayak and everything. So, you feel good, get the big head and everything. I cast out and all of a sudden I felt some kind of tick, and man, it's probably one of the hardest hook sets I've ever did in my life. You know, I'm showing out with this hook set, and like at first I think I actually have something because you know it didn't like pull out or whatever. I ended up being hooked on a rock.
Yeah.
I had to go up to it and pull it out, and I pedaled away like I had to get. It was so embarrassing. Yeah, I just did this big hook set like I'm,
Swinging
like
for the fences.
I'm Kevin Van Dam setting the hook on a big old fish. It was a rock.
That was the best time, and I've definitely been guilty of like oh yeah, a little bit of show off, set the brakes on a good fish and fight for a good while, and you have an audience in front of you or whatever, even guiding sometimes, and then you realize that you have like a 7.5-foot branch of a sycamore or something. But those will get you sometimes, but they can also make for some exciting times when fishing slow. So we'll take it.
All right, so we got the when and the where. Let's talk rods and line. Like I've heard mono because it floats, but I've heard other things too. Do you do straight mono? Do you do braid to mono, braid to fluoro, or what is your go-to there?
Well, so yes, mono floats pretty well, but braid floats very well. And braid is good because there's no elasticity to it. It's just straight. I mean, it's a straight connection to your rod, to your reel. As far as that, like in general, I'll fish if the water's clear or whatnot. I'll fish from a braid to about a 7 to 10 foot section of fluorocarbon. And I like fluoro because I guess it's more invisible. It's tougher to see for fish than mono, and it doesn't stretch at all. So I think an important part of topwater is having that connection. I'll set my drag pretty hard majority of the time when I'm fishing topwater. I want that direct connection right to the bait. A lot of times I've even have the rod tip angled right at the bait, at the lure when I'm bringing it in. It's not like jigging where you're having a real high rod tip and a little bit of a bow in the line. So depending on what presentation that it is that I'm doing, I'm usually direct contact, right in line with the lure. So it's always either braid to fluoro, or if I'm night fishing or it's stained water, I'll probably just run straight braid. But back to the conversation of snags, straight braid is pretty deadly, pretty dangerous. If you do get hung up on something that you didn't intend to, I think with the either mono or fluoro, that breaking point is essential sometimes. If, in certain situations like moving water, I know early on when I started fishing, I'd get a jig stuck with, on straight braid, and man, you realize how fast that water is moving when the lure stops, but you're not, and trying to get back to it. So that can present a pretty dangerous situation at times. As far as a rod, I throw a lot of different stuff. I don't think I'm traditional in the sense of, this rod for this presentation. I kind of match the weight of the presentation, the lure to the rod, but I would say majority of the time that I'm fishing, like say a buzzbait or a Whopper, Plopper, something like that, I'm using a heavier action spinning rod, pretty long too. Big reel. I use like an arbor reel. I think I have one floating around here somewhere. But that big spool, one of those large reels, I think helps with the casting distance, and I think it also helps with like twisting, line twist, because sometimes you'll do that when you're casting and reeling all day. So eliminating some of that line twist, I think, is a benefit as well for some of that. And like I said before, I'll go with a pretty tight drag the whole time. Just a quick tip, I guess, with that being said as well, like fishing buzzbaits, direct connection to that lure is right before the lure touches the water is when I would flip the bail over a lot of times with just my fingertips. I don't care to crank the reel over. I don't like that jolting action a whole lot, and I think it's kind of bad on the reel. I'm not sure about that, but I want that bait on the surface the whole time on the way back. But when you do get that take, having that line and that drag set tight, you kind of want to have a pause when all the excitement happens. You've been waiting for it, you've been casting, you see the boil or the blow up, whatever a take is. I almost give it a second, like that stutter stop, kind of a second, like feel the weight of the fish before you set the brakes on it, because I've pulled a lot of lures out of fish's mouth, like just getting caught in that excitement, because they'll smack it, and sometimes it's in their mouth, sometimes it's still 2 inches away, and it was just like a false hit, or they missed it, So,
All right.
I guess that goes with the presentation, or the tackle that I use as well.
Rewind real quick, and by the way, I just noticed your Steelers picture in the back. Go Steelers! But so but to go back real quick to the line thing, just for reference, if you're throwing like a crankbait or a jerkbait or something like that, what kind of line are you throwing it on?
So crankbait is probably one of the exceptions that I do throw more of the monofilament. Sometimes I'll have the baitcaster and reel set up with only mono at that point. I like a little bit of the give with the mono, with that presentation. And like I said, I know that might not be a traditional answer for that.
Well, no, the reason I asked that is because I've been hearing a lot of people lately when they're talking about, pretty much any lure with a treble hook, talking about using mono or using the fluoro coated line, because it does have a little more stretch, and it kind of helps set those treble hooks into the fish. So when you were saying straight braid with like Whopper ploppers and stuff like that, which I use straight braid with Whopper ploppers whenever I use them. But when you were saying that, I was wondering if you didn't, like, you felt differently about that, or if Topwater was just different than submerged lures with treble hooks.
Yeah. So to answer your question, honestly, I don't throw a ton of Whopper ploppers. It's one of those things, like when I was guiding a lot, I threw a bunch of them. Then you get a couple of them stuck in like your shirt or your ear or something, and that'll make you not want to throw them too much either. But
oh no, I caught one in the nose, and
what's that?
I said, I don't know, I caught one in the nose last year, and I still used the hell out of it.
Yeah, one of our buddies did this year, actually in a tournament that I fished against him in, and he sent a picture, and I felt bad. I think he hit both treble hooks in 2 different spots of his lip and nose and stuff. So yeah.
I got lucky. Mine hit me in my nose and it cut me, but it didn't actually stick in. It just kind of hit me and flew over here. But it was bleeding for a good while. I think it hit a lot of my sunglasses, so I think that absorbed a lot of the hit.
Nice. But yeah, with the monofilament, I think it is a good idea to run mono when you're throwing things with treble hooks. And that little bit of elasticity, that little bit of stretch, it almost acts like you were using a moderate action rod. That little bit of give, because some of them stick pretty well to the side of fish and in the fish's mouth, and otherwise, like, it's just a small little bend of a hook. So it's not like you're setting a big 4-aught hook into the corner of the fish's mouth when they're not going anywhere. Something I actually learned, I think it was from Jeremy Wade, actually, like setting the hook on some of these, whatever exotic fish that he was after, and they had a bony mouth, and his hookup percentage went down when he was using more hooks, like treble hooks or twin hook setup. And he found that he kept the fish hooked better with the single hook, because all that pressure and whatnot went directly into, the fish. So kind of using that, I guess, that theory a little bit. I'll probably throw more things with a single hook rather than with a treble hook setup, but I still throw lots of crankbaits and jerk baits, all that. Jerk bait wise, I definitely throw braid to fluorocarbon. I don't care for straight fluorocarbon because of the line memory of it. When you see those spools like set out, a spinning rod or baitcaster, and you see those loops, that to me, I don't care for that amount, and I know you get a lot of backlashes from it. And to me, I feel like I'm always changing it out. So braid, I can usually get a good few years out of most of the time, and just constantly re-snip that liter of fluorocarbon. A lot of the jerkbait fishing that I do, is probably a little more slower paced than most. I mean, I do some ripping jerkbait stuff as well, but that dead stick presentation, letting it live in there, I think that's important. The fish has time to focus on it and study it. So I want to give it the best chance of looking as realistic as possible at that, at that moment.
It made me feel good to hear you say about that you use a lot of braid to floor, just because I don't have a ton of rods, and so I end up changing back and forth between. I have 4 basic rods, 2 spinning, 2 casting that I use, and I end up changing stuff between those a lot. So, and I run braid to floor on all of them for the most part. So knowing that I don't have to switch that out or run one straight mono or straight fluoro, that makes me feel a little better about my options. So
yeah,
but I see what you said too about mono kind of mimicking the parabolic bend of a moderate action rod. It makes sense because if you I don't have any real good parabolic bend rods, but I can add mono easy enough, add a mono leader and get some of that, I guess. So
yeah, and I think like you said, maybe not going out with a dozen rods at a time. Like every time you're changing out those presentations, you're not cutting into your main line. It's all pretty expensive, braid in particular. So when you're just chopping a few inches off that leader and then you replace the leader, you're not actually cutting into your spool of line. So yeah, like I said, I prefer that in general. I like the Seagar. I think it's the red label. It's probably actually the cheaper of it. And I've auditioned a handful of all the fluorocarbons, but that's my go-to there. A lot of times I'll run 15 pound on spinning rod and I'll run 20 pound on bait casters. So 15 is probably a little heavy for most people. Yeah. But
yeah, that's what I was about to say. We just had this conversation last week, talking about 12 pound on a spinning rod. I'm like, that just seems really heavy for a spinning rod to me, because the biggest I'll do is 10 on a spinning rod. So, but I'm not that great of a fisherman, so no judging. It just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, and I'll spool the braided line that I'll use would be like that 4 pound test, or 4 pound diameter, which I think is the equivalent of 12 or 15 pound test. So it's a lot thinner. But I think from spending so much time on the river and breaking off that traditional like 6-8 pound test that you would put on a spinning rod, like it just wasn't holding up to the duty of smallmouth fishing. And then getting into fishing structure, essentially jigging deep water for largemouth and the heaviest stuff you could find, but doing it in finesse ways sometimes. I've done that for a long time, and I've had great success with it. Like, it's maddening when you have something that is big and it gets it's digging into log jam or branches or whatever you have down deep, and you can't move it. And when you do, you're breaking them off or whatnot. So I think between the structure of rivers, the fleissiness of smallmouth, and then say just, jigging deeper for largemouth or whatever it is, that's been a pretty good combination, and the same thing, snakehead fishing, they live in some very dense cover. There's a ton of grass and spatterdock and, big, heavy stalked lily pads, that kind of stuff. To be able to pull those fish out of that stuff, like, I like it to know that knot and that line's going to hold. But there again, I've never had any issue with like open water fishing it. Never turned it off, I guess, so I guess I have confidence in that. But, going back to that 4 and 6 pound test, like real micro stuff, success rate's probably a little lower for me personally.
that makes sense. So, all right. Let's see, what else can we cover on Topwater?
So for somebody that's newer to bass fishing and wanting to try out Topwater for the first time, what's the easiest lure in your opinion for them to try out?
I would say the easiest would be probably the Whopper Plopper. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a simple lure. It does its job. You cast it and you reel it. You can get creative with it and and add pauses or almost kind of pop it a little bit, but it stays afloat the whole time. I learned Topwater with poppers and buzzbait, but it's kind of a combination of that essentially. You know, the Whopper Plopper is, if you're going to go out and throw primarily only Topwater, I would say, you know, have your Whopper Plopper on, but bring a buzzbait too, because when you get into that cover, I like smashing like structure with Topwater. I think that change of angle and that explosion that you cause into running it into something inanimate or whatever situation is, that's a natural, you know, it's a natural instinct for bass to hit that. You know, it's a bait fish eluding a predator or whatnot, just like a crankbait would work. So, you know, take that buzzbait too if you're going to go out and throw the Whopper Plopper all day, and keep that for maybe, you know, some of the more snaggy areas, so to speak. You know, open rock ledges or wood, pads, grass, whatever it is. As a starter, you know, I mean, I think that's good. I definitely get into a lot more technique, I guess, with Topwater. Some of it I feel like is just by accident. You learn things, you know what I mean? I've talked to people that have caught their largest fish, like burning a jig back. You know, they were done the cast 50 feet away, and there's a burn in the back end to hit their next cast. And, you know, you have this jig forming this V across the surface of the water, and then all of a sudden, you know, 11-pound largemouth just goes ape shit on it or whatever. If you can replicate those things, I think that's, you know, you're tapping into something different then. That's a new pattern that not every boat in front of you has done, you know. I mean, buzzbaits, Whopper Ploppers, poppers, all that stuff, there's no secret to that. People know about them, they fish them. So getting a little bit further into it, I'll do things that are a bit different, you know, like skipping a fluke or a large, like soft plastic swim bait, and I mean burning it as fast as you can reel that thing, to where it's out of the water more than it's in the water. You cause some crazy reaction strikes because of that, and sometimes it's you know, it's a lot of work, but it pays off big dividends on some days. So, fishing some of those presentations, but maybe doing it in a different way can be, you know, the game changer, so to speak.
I've definitely had a few times where that's happened to me, where I'm at the end of my cast, just kind of trying to get it back in, and that's when they hit it. And I've done it, and I've heard about people, especially on the Susquehanna, talking about burning a fluke back right across the top, like just almost weightless, and how often that works. And I've tried it. Didn't have a ton of success for it, but I didn't throw it for long either, just because I wasn't sure I was doing it correctly, or, you know, whatever. But I've definitely heard that being an effective technique before, so it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yep. The same thing there again too. I'm not sure how Whopper Ploppers handle with like burning them back in, because there's quite a bit of resistance there. But buzzbaits, like, we've had fantastic days, you know, Potomac, Shenandoah, where the boat is moving full speed and you're casting a structure, you know, along the shoreline or whatever, ledges in the middle of the river. So between you reeling fast and that boat pulling it out of those areas fast, and just explosive hits, you know, so that bait is moving very fast at that point. You'd be surprised some of those fish that will catch it and get it, you know. So.
Well, as far as burning a Whopper Plopper goes, last year Whopper Plopper was my lure. I threw it when it was 100 degrees outside or 60 degrees outside. You know, I don't know, I had some success on it, and it's the first time I'd had success like that on any lure, so I just kind of stuck with it. But there was one, when you said that, there was one particular day that popped in my mind. Stand still there, Mike. But yeah, one day I was casting parallel to the bank, and I always do like a steady retrieve, but try to get it where just that right plop. You can hear it whenever it's plopping right. So try to get it that. Well, I casted, but it was a bad cast. Like, I think I casted like way over off the bank from where I was wanting to go. So I was like, I was reeling it as fast as I could to get it back in so I can recast it. And when it was about a foot in front of the kayak, boom, it hit. And I had him for probably 2 seconds, and he jumped off. So there are times where, burning it will be effective.
That's it. Yeah, it's a lot of work to do that if you're going to throw it all day.
Oh yeah, you better have a high-speed reel if you're going to burn it all day, because you're going to burn up your arms.
Another technique, Susquehanna in particular, but it's worked for me in other places. Spinnerbaits, just burn them as fast as you can get them to go with, they cast that V off of them when they're subsurface essentially, and then they'll come up and just pop and spit on the top of the water. That's been a very productive technique as well. Done pretty well with tidal largemouth because of that same thing. But like you said, it's long cast and you're just cranking down on it, so it's sometimes it's short lived. If they're eating it, it makes you want to do it more. If they're not, then, you do get tired from it. But
now, if you're fishing moving water, when you're making these casts for topwater, are you casting upstream and pulling it down with the current, or against the current, or across the current? What's your, or all of the above?
All of the above for sure. Kind of what the fish tell you essentially. I would say maybe starting out casting it straight across. You want to cover as much water, as many of those seams and breaks and shoots and everything that you can, until you kind of locate the pattern of where these fish are holding. Now, with that being said, that might be the presentation because you're essentially putting it in front of the most fish at that time. Say, like right now, we have low and clear conditions. So if you're just floating and casting, then yeah, I would probably go mostly kind of just straight off the sides of the boat. But also, I wouldn't only do that, so to speak. A lot of what I'm doing with Topwater is contouring structure, and definitely like, when the sun is up and rocking and rolling, beating the shade, so if you're going to be right on the bank and you're bringing it, a parallel cast to the bank, there's a lot of fish there, or a ledge system or whatever else, those fish are directly underneath of it. I would try to contour that structure or that shade line. If, you're in the river again, so to speak, the corner pocket, the side pocket, like right before the current breaks through or drops down into the chute, those corner pockets are like, notoriously hold the aggressive fish, so to speak. They're up on there. It's like a hunter in a tree stand. They're looking down over this pool of moving water, and it's a buffet line, just bringing them, what they're looking for, so they can dodge down quick into that pool or out into the chute to move and get that, the prey that they're looking for. So I will target those areas all the time of that corner pocket where like I said, the water's moving around that object. That pillow right in front of it is heavy, topwater area. That's good stuff there. But yeah, I mean, I've positioned downstream, fishing upstream, and that very quick retrieve of, cast it above the chute and bring it straight down in it. The water's moving quickly through those areas, so you got to stay with the lure and you got to work hard to do that. But the fish can catch it, smallmouth in particular. And also being said, you can fish downstream. You can do kind of a big, long pendulum swing, maybe in that same chute that's behind you at that same point. You don't have to retrieve nearly as fast. You can almost kind of let the lure do itself, stay afloat on that cast as well. So I wouldn't say there's any rules. I would just say kind of go with what the fish are telling you. If the bait fish are popping along grass lines, then I would definitely probably try some parallel casts along the grass lines, approach it from all angles that you can. That's the kind of beautiful thing about, I guess, kayaking is there's no rules. You can kind of get into that position. You're not standing on the shoreline of a farm pond or whatever. You can hit it from, straight out or the front side, the back side of it. May just take a little bit of work, but you can get in position to do that.
Definitely some good advice there. Because I know there's been times when I'm floating down the river and either I'm fighting the current or whatever, and kind of positioning is almost my last thought, just because I'm more trying just to, keep up with myself and keep the kayak somewhat moving in the right direction, or so I can't always. I know a lot of times, sometimes they say that they're looking upstream and you want to have it coming downstream to them, but sometimes that's almost the hardest cast at times, especially, and you tend to get snagged if you're fishing not topwater, obviously, but you kind of get snagged the most coming straight downstream. So I think that's definitely good advice, to that you have almost infinite angles that you can attack something from, so don't be tied to just one direction. So
That's right. Yeah. And like I said, can beat, like, physically run the baits into some of that structure. If you're there on the river and you have all these exposed rocks and everything, I know it's a little bit it's a little bit of commitment to run like a $10-15 hard bait into those things, but if you can pull it off, you'll see some pretty explosive hits like that. That might be the presentation of maybe one of your, like, soft plastic topwater baits or something along those lines that you can try it with a little bit. But buzz baits are very versatile when it comes to that. So
I know I've talked to Juan Vrood. Are you familiar with him?
I know that guy. Oh, yeah.
He's a big fan, I think, of pulling buzz baits through the hairiest stuff, the fast moving water. So that was the first time I'd heard about that, and I've tried that a few times and had some success with it. So
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah. Fast stuff. And then, like you said, sometimes there's not really any written rules to any of this, but it could be the middle of daylight, sun shining, and you get them in slow, stagnant, dead water, you know what I mean? And they blow up out of nowhere. So I wouldn't only do, one thing in particular. There's days that I couldn't get a topwater bite, and then there's days that, and you spend all day and you're just wearing out. All your baits are falling apart, and have hook rats, skirts are falling off of buzz baits, and those are fun days when you start piecing stuff together in your tackle box, just because that's what they're eating. It's pretty cool.
right. And I mean, there's such a gamut between just your speed of retrieve on topwaters, because there's days I've had where I'll be throwing a popper and I do pop and then let it sit for 5-10 seconds, and then pop, and so it's polar opposite of burning it, obviously, but sometimes that's what they want. So I guess you guys gotta try it out and see what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and same thing with jig fishing, crankbaits, whatever it is. Like, being versatile is definitely an asset to I think any decent angler. You know what I mean? So just not fishing one thing one way. Just small changes in profile or retrieve or any of that thing can sometimes make a big difference. I have a handful of buzz baits in front of me, that some that I made, some that are production or whatnot, and I can tell you that there's subtle differences going out fishing with 4 or 5 other people. Sometimes Juan Brute as well. One presentation, one of those small differences can mean, hey, you're on fish all day, or you're not. So being able to change it up and kind of getting outside of maybe that comfort zone. We spoke of the Whopper Plopper earlier and how contagious it is, because I don't want to say it's easy, but it can be easy. You cast, you retrieve, and then, hey, there's a fish there. You can get pretty artistic with the presentation of that bait. When you start finding out how these fish are staging and what kind of water they're in, you can do some creative things with those. So, changing up the size is one thing, the color, having that at your access there is always good. Having a full tackle box worth of things to try, but using that same lure in different manners sometimes too can be that that changing factor for sure.
Do you ever use a trailer on your buzz baits?
I've tried it once or twice, but I think I've killed more fish than anything. So, I'm sorry, like the trailer hook I've met. I've used a trailer, like a plastic trailer, a handful of times, like floating, like real soft swim baits. I've used flukes before. That's actually one of the things I was going to talk about too. So I tinker with a lot of lures. You know, I'm always making something and painting something or carving something, whatever it is. Something I found out early on with buzzbaits. I was fishing hot summer heat, like upper Potomac, and that's where I definitely did a lot of my uh, like shuttle trips early on, you know, by myself. I was on the river all the time, and I'd cover like an insane amount of mileage, 12, 13, 14 miles a day. And, you know, now I don't do that. I focus on a smaller body of water, you know, for a smaller section of water. But I would throw buzz baits a lot. And one of the presentations I would throw a lot would be like the Strike King mini buzz, because even in the middle of the day, you can still get hit. And that's like an 1/8 ounce buzz bait, pretty small, really small profile. And you could conjure them up and get hits with that to where they weren't hitting those larger 1/4 ounce or 3/8 ounce buzz baits, you know. So I kind of took that, you know, they showing me what to do essentially, or the fish telling me what to do, and started tinkering with more buzz baits, you know, getting into different props, the propeller there, and different beads, wire armatures or whatnot that you can kind of make your own castings with, and different lead, you know, the head mold itself too. But to speak on the trailer part of it, I learned that like the sparser amount of the rubber, you know, the skirt on the buzz bait, it seemed like, you know, I was catching more fish when they would rip a handful of them out, or rocks would beat them up enough to where they didn't have much on it anymore. So I played around at a fly shop and I found badger fur. Sounds kind of wild, but you could buy it like in small sections. I imagine they tie some type of nymph or you know, some type of presentation for them for fly fishing. But I would take this badger fur and tie that onto a buzz bait and like forgo the rubber skirt altogether. What I found was that bait's pretty cool, or that fur is pretty neat because it breathes essentially. So in between cranking down on this moving bait, every one of the turn of the handle, this thing is breathing, which is like rubber does too. But when you're pulling it through, it has a very thin profile. And badger fur is kind of cool because it's like a white into a tan color, and for every 20 or so hairs, there's a long black one. So what that does on the lure is it looks like a little black skinny tail behind it all. So just changing the profile essentially is what that was. But you know, it definitely made a difference on some of those trips as well. So if I have the time, I'll tie some of those up now. But it's a lot of work going into something that can be thrown away in a few seconds, you know.
Yeah.
All right. So otherwise, I've heard, you know, color-wise, color selection, bone, black is good. Any other things you would lean towards?
So like, I like natural colors a lot. I'll throw mostly like a greenish or brown, olive tones, bluegill pattern, that kind of stuff. And I think it's more of a confidence just in what I like to do. I mean, I've read a bunch of articles, you know, years ago that if it didn't have a white belly, then it wasn't worth throwing or whatnot. You know, a lot of people white and chartreuse for topwater, and I've had decent success with that as well. But I do like the more natural tones, you know. There again, I'll paint some of the jig heads and the custom make the skirts and stuff with maybe a little bands in it or a darker back, or I like gold flash a lot, gold and copper. Those colors I try to bring into a lot of my presentations, you know, spinnerbaits included. Black at nighttime, you know, black and blue, dark purples, that kind of stuff. I like throwing, you know, big black buzz baits at nighttime for sure. Oversized blades, you know, with a pretty large amount of bulkiness to the skirt or trailer, you know, put some extra vibration out there and give them a little bit larger of a target. That also being said, for if you're fishing muddy water, do the same thing in that situation. But I guess like just like fly guys or whatever else, match the hatch. If you see some bait fish, what they're eating, I would probably go that way before I would, just stick to one color or whatnot. So
okay, that makes sense. Cool. Anything else, Ryan, you can think of, man?
No, I kind of feel like I'm going to end up throwing Topwater Sunday when I go out now.
That happens to me every show. I'm like, oh, well, now I'm going to go throw that.
And then you throw it for 5 minutes and it's like, I haven't got anything yet. Let me go back to my go-to.
Yeah.
That's why we never learn anything. That's why we continue having to do this segment on this podcast.
Is there anything else you can think of, Jed, that we're forgetting, or any other tips you have?
So we spoke a lot about burning topwater, which I think is a fun technique. Slowing down can be a very good one as well. On topwater, I have a package here of one of my favorite topwater buzzbaits, and it's the Cavitron. And they advertise that as the slowest buzzbait ever. That can be pretty good because essentially it's staying in the strike zone longer, so it can be the proper technique. And the same thing, like we said before, about the versatility of an angler, hey, maybe have one get ready to burn and have one that's a little bit slower. And then once you get that bite, you draw that attention, you can stick to that, a little bit more. Besides that there, along with Topwater, like the subsurface stuff is fun. That's really cool. Like I know a lot of people are throwing like the rats and the mouse presentation, and that's, essentially it is Topwater. It might be an inch below or less, but they can draw some pretty awesome strikes too that you can visually see. I think it's one of the appeals of Topwater is because you're getting a hit. I mean, I think a lot of times with jig fishing, finesse fishing, whatever, you get hits too. Probably as many, but you just don't feel them all the time. You know what I mean? So when you visually see these fish attacking your bait, that's like the contagion. That's the cool part. That's, you're doing something right, and it's fun. You get the confirmation of it. But yeah, so I think experimenting with, what we were talking about, like with Ryan there, as far as trailers or whatnot, like I've seen people use grubs and flukes and all these different things. Yeah, it's not going to hurt. I mean, a skirt, you can slide right back onto that buzzbait. So, getting creative and thinking outside the box a little bit, it can be fun. And then, when you start doing those things, that's like your secret in front of your buddies. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, I don't have any more of those white anymore. So, but yeah, it can be the game changer, like I said. So just being versatile, going out there, and if you're going to commit a day to throwing Topwater, maybe rig up your 4 rods with that Topwater too, or different Topwater baits. Try that slow cadence of the popper, or try that fast moving, walk the dog bait, JRC or whatnot. Like they can be pretty fun, So I'm sorry.
No, you just reminded me. I was going to ask you earlier. You said when I asked you about throwing a trailer, you said something about a trailer hook and killing fish. That made me interested. I haven't thought about throwing a trailer hook on a buzzbait, but I did order some for spinnerbaits because that was a technique that I kind of wanted to try out a little more. And so can you talk about that a little bit? Like you said something about killing fish. Is that something that I shouldn't do? Like,
I would. I mean, I see why people throw them. For you get those short strikes or whatever else. Mm-hmm. You're probably gonna catch more fish that maybe you wouldn't have before. It's just me personally. I'm not a big fan of them because of the aggression that we spoke of earlier of some of these smallmouth or whatnot. Like, man, I've caught fish that they would have the whole buzzbait wedged inside their mouth. And sometimes they're not even big fish. It's just like, wow, they took, essentially a 5-inch bait of, twisted metal and lead and everything else, and it's all the way in their head as fast as they ate it. You know, it's already right there. So with that being said, sometimes a trailer hook would cause a mess if, you know, it's down a little bit further in the gills or in the gullet or whatnot. So
Yeah,
I just chose
that
not
makes
to.
sense.
Yeah, but I know people have had, you know, pretty good success with them, as well as spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, having that trailer hook on there. But
So
yeah,
it sounds like, to me, it kind of sounds like something like, you know, don't start out using it, but if you're getting a lot of short strikes, maybe throw one on there.
if you have the because I think a lot of it they'll just use like a little piece of surgical tube over the eyelet
Yeah.
of second hook. So you should be able to kind of maybe take that on and off. You know, it might be a little difficult getting it off, but definitely wouldn't be hard to get it on. So
No, they
maybe,
pop right on. I put one on a spinnerbait
Yeah.
just to test it out, and you know it'll slide right on.
cool. Yeah, but yeah, like you said there again too, if it works for you, then yeah, go with it. You know, that's a I hate to say anything, I'll never throw a certain presentation or whatever, but yeah, it's I've experimented with like certain trailer hooks and other presentations, even soft plastics and stuff that, for instance, I was burning, or even just putting the hook further back in the soft plastic, and I didn't notice any increase in the amount of fish that I actually caught or whatnot, or that stuck to it. In general, I usually use pretty thin wire hooks. You know what I mean? I can go straight to a 5/0 like heavy duty hook, and but in general, usually some pretty thin gauge wire hooks. And I think that they just stick to that better. So even making some of those buzz baits, if I'm making them, I'll use a smaller hook than I think than you would find in any production models. So I think that helps out with the hookup percentage a good bit as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I've definitely taken a liking to thinner wire hooks.
Yeah, finesse fishing and whatnot too. That's pretty much the only way I go with that. But
Well, something that I don't know if it's knowledge outside the podcast, but something we've talked about a lot, inside the podcast, like in our group chat and stuff. One of our sponsors is JigMasters, and they make a flipping and football head jig with a light wire hook. And one of the talks about it is, being in a kayak, we don't have the hook setting pattern or power of, say somebody on the bank or in a boat. One, we're not standing as much. Two, we're in this light kayak, so when we do this, the kayak can jerk up and all that. So that lighter wire hook allows for you not to have as much power to get it to penetrate. So being in a kayak, a lot of the stuff I throw is smaller hooks now.
cool.
Because
Yeah, I never thought about the platform that we use, but it is associated to it. It'd be a disadvantage to leverage, like you're saying, for sure.
So you come on here to teach us stuff, and we teach you something.
Hey. I mean, I don't think I made up any of this stuff, so I try to learn every day for sure, from everybody. But yeah, I appreciate that.
I was going to ask, how about snap swivels? I know we were talking a while ago. We were talking about ploppers on one of our other broadcasts, and we talked about putting a snap swivel on the front to keep the line twist. Is that anything else that you would put that on, or do you use them at all?
I don't use them just because I dislike having that extra bit of, something else that could fail or break or whatnot. Also, kind of get snagged. A lot of times, Topwater, like I said, I'll throw it in some pretty heavy structure. If there's grass or anything, those little things get caught on those pretty easily. So yeah, I mean, I could see why people would use them, but no, I'm more of a fan of a direct connection to all the boards. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially Topwater, I'd say.
All right. I think I'm out of questions, man.
Cool. Yeah.
Well,
I think I pretty much covered everything. I wrote a few notes down or whatnot, but just try to. I know I bounced around a lot in conversation, so I apologize for that. But
No,
I think it was good. Yeah, definitely.
A lot of good info.
But-
You got any sponsors you want to shout out real quick?
Yeah. Wilderness Systems has always been there. I really appreciate them. They've taken care of me for, I don't know, I think I've been with them for about 7 years now or whatever. Eastern Panhandle Bicycles out of Martinsburg, West Virginia. Good guys there. And White Fly Outfitters, I've worked for them for a long time. Fantastic group of guys, cool shop. Same thing there, just helped me along my way for sure. Definitely in the learning progression and a lot of information from those guys. So over the years, they're probably one of my bigger ones. So I think those guys, there's been a bunch of people throughout the years that have helped me out in a huge way. So
how about where can people find you if they want to look you up on social media?
Social media, I think I'm only doing Facebook. That's about it. It's just
Okay.
Jedediah Plunkert. Yeah. Lots of fish pictures, a tattoo here and there, and maybe a fire engine. I'm not sure. A little bit of everything.
That's cool. Are you still doing tattooing, or do you take a break from that?
I am. Yeah, that's what I was talking to you guys last night, actually. I was there pretty late the last 2 nights, and now I'll go back to the fire station tomorrow. So I work 24 hours, and I'm off 3. And usually out of those 3 days, I'm tattooing 2 of them. So
wow. Okay.
Go ahead. It's going on 19 or 20 years now. So that's cool.
When you said you're at the shop, I don't know why, but I saw Kayak shop.
That's what I was thinking too.
So my next tattoo, I need to come see you then.
That's it. Yes, sir. Yeah.
I was thinking that too, man. I've been trying to think of a good fish one since now that's what I'm into. So
cool. We can sketch up some stuff and get it drawn up, man. That'd be cool. That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Or tattooing at the same time.
So everybody hit up Jedediah. Use promo code Paddle and Fin. He's gonna give you a free tattoo.
Be careful, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, some hidden objects in some of those things if you once.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for coming on, Jedediah. It was awesome. We'll definitely hit you up again sometime. I'm definitely interested in potentially getting a tattoo. It's been something I've been thinking about adding to my other tattoos for a while, so I may hit you up on that.
Cool, man. Yeah, well, thanks, guys, for having me. And, let me know when you're ready to rock and roll with that. And we'll do a compound trip, man. Maybe we'll do some fishing and tattooing and
oh, dude, that's sweet.
What we have to do. So,
you can just take the river water and rub it into the tattoo to help it heal.
Absolutely, man.
And I haven't been inked in so long. It's been forever since I've got any ink work done, and I feel stupid because I got like a tattoo on my forearm and one on my upper arm, but I have no other tattoos, and so like this arm's completely blank canvas. Well, this arm's got 2 tattoos, so I need to even it up.
There you go. Or tie them all together. That's fine too. We can do the whole thing. The last one that I got actually I've done myself, and it was it's a giant smallmouth. Like it's the largest tattoo that I wear, and it's on my leg. It goes from my knee like up over my hip. So I haven't finished it yet, but I got a lot done in one shot. So it's
can you put it in screen?
I'm sorry.
Are you able to put it in screen so we can see it?
I can maybe show you some here without revealing too much.
Yes.
So it goes. So the idea was, I'm not sure if you can see that or not. The idea is this is its head, and then the leaves were from different places around that I fish a lot. So the leaves will be colored eventually in the smallmouth. That's like I said, just his head and gill plate, and it goes all the way up into here.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so you can kind of make out some.
Yeah, we don't need to see all of
them. Yeah, there's a handful of tattoos on me for sure, but that one, like I said, I'm excited to finish that up because I think with the color and the leaves and stuff, it ought to be pretty cool.
And you're doing that yourself?
Yeah, I'm right-handed, so it's like all the way across my own body. Oh. It's a literal pain in the ass, like it really is. But man. I get into some stuff, man. A little bit of everything, but but yeah. Let me know if you guys want some tattoos. We'll line it up. I'm usually booked out a couple months, so just give me a heads up, and we'll start the artwork going. But that'd be.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. It's been a good time. Everybody, it's been Bass Fishing for Noobs on the Paddle and Fin podcast, bringing you the techniques, tricks, and tips to help you rip more lips. Later.
Later, guys.
Have a good one, guys.